excited today because we're going to be diving into mental health and stress management, which is a really big topic, a very important topic that's happening right now. And so I decided to bring on a guest who is an expert in mental health, who's going to talk with us because, again, it's not my expertise, really give us some great information and help us through this time. She's coming all the way from Canada, and you might know by the last name that we are related. So teaching and training and giving back and working with people is something that clearly runs in the blood. So Jeananne, as we get started here, first tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us about your company, Catalyst Training Services, and the great work that you're doing.
Awesome. Well, first off, thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be on your platform. I'm very excited to speak to your people, especially about a topic I'm very, very passionate about. So thank you. Yes, my name is Jeananne Nasruddin. I am the director of Catalyst Training Services. We are an organization based here in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, but we do work across the country in mental health training and advocacy. So we do a lot of work with nonprofit organizations. We do a lot of work with corporate organizations, oil, gas, county work, and we look at workplace wellness, in particular, how mental health correlates with that. I've had the pleasure of working in the capacity of mental health for give or take about 20 years. I specialize in working with high risk and vulnerable youth. And so when we look at a lot of the different challenges that youth face, mental health always seems to be the common denominator. So I've worked in various capacities with that in institutions, group homes, community services. So I'm very, very passionate about mental health. So I'm very excited to be here and talk more about it, bring some awareness to it.
Yeah, thank you. And we're honored to have you here. I first want to start off with just a basic question of what is mental health? And the reason why is because, as you know, there's a lot of stigma around mental health. And a lot of times we can think that mental health equals like extreme mental illness, right? And so there's a stigma around seeking help or even just talking about it. So just tell us, what is mental health?
In layman's terms. Well, first off, I wanna speak to that term mental health, because it's exactly what you said. Society would have us believe that mental health is a bad thing. And I really want to just dispel that for a second. When we talk about mental health encompasses our emotional, like how we feel, our psychological, our cognitive ability, as well as our social well-being, our connectivity, right? It affects how we think, how we feel, how we act. It also plays a huge role in determining how we handle adversity, our ability to obtain or maintain really healthy relationships, and the choices that we make in life. One of the things that I really want to stress is when we talk about mental health, it's really important to identify that everybody has mental health. And I cannot stress this enough. I can't tell you how many times I've spoken to people and I've asked them, in interviews, tell me about your health. And they're like, oh, my health is great. I do this, I go to the gym, I do this and that. And I say, that's great. And I say, tell me about your mental health. And instantly people get their back up against the wall because it's like this dirty word that we don't talk about. But I want to let you and your viewers in on one of the biggest secrets is this. Everybody has mental health. Everybody. Just like we have physical health, we all have mental health. To say you don't have mental health is like saying you don't have physical health. And even with our physical health, right, we could be, working out every day and going for walks and be very active, and then we break our leg and then our mobility is limited. Well, even with limited mobility, you still have physical health. It's the same theory with mental health, right? It ebbs and it flows. And sometimes we can have really, really good mental health where we're connecting to those natural supports. We're taking care of our mind, body, and spirit. And then we lose our job. Or there's a death in the family. Is that going to affect your mental health? Absolutely. But one of the things, if your viewers take nothing away from this chat, I really hope they take this one, as you call it, golden nugget. We all have mental health, and mental health ebbs and it flows. It could be really, really good mental health. And the opposite end of that spectrum is we could have a mental health disorder, right? So segueing into that, I think it's really important. And when we talk about mental health, we talk about the difference between mental health and a mental health problem. Okay, because that's a very, very important distinction to make. When we look at what is a mental health problem, it's anything that disrupts your emotional, psychological, and social well being, right? And even within that, of a mental health problem, there's various degrees and capacities in which we can look at that. We can have a mental health problem where a person, for example, could be experiencing anxiety or depression, but for the most part, they're still able to function, right? They may not be functioning at a 10, but they're still meeting the expectations of their day. They're able to get up, they're able to get their kids off to school, they're able to function at work. They may not be functioning at a 10, but they're still functioning, right? All the way to the opposite end of that spectrum where we look at a disorder, right? And when we talk about a disorder, it's that significant impact on a person's ability to function. These people are not getting out of bed. They are not functioning. They are not, like, they're really struggling to kind of maintain their daily responsibilities, right? And so it's really, really important that when we look at mental illness, we don't instinctively go to disorder, right? Because there's lots of people living with mental health problems who are functioning, who are doing what they need to be doing, and on first sight, you would never know, right? That's what makes mental health really tricky, is that it's that invisible illness, right? Going back to the analogy that I gave about the broken leg.
Yeah.
If you have a broken leg, I can see it, and it adds validity to my understanding that you have a physical impairment, right? But if we're living with depression, it's not always as obvious, right, as a broken leg would be.
Yeah.
So it's very important to make that distinction and really recognize that everybody has mental health, right? But you really have to look at, where is your mental health on that spectrum, right? And recognize that it ebbs and it flows. Imagine right now with COVID-19, a lot of people, their mental health is going to be compromised by this, right? But that it's not a static condition, right?
Yes.
We will get through this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that. And that's a really great segue into my next question. But you're just so very clear in how you explain it. And I think that is a really important factor that you have, so that we can fully understand, like, what is mental
Yeah.
health. And
Well, I think it's important to remember that not everybody is from this world, right? And so in the world of human services is what I mean by that. So really explaining it in ways that are digestible is important, right?
Yeah,
It helps
absolutely.
break down the stigma of mental health.
Absolutely. So, as you were saying, how can we manage some of our mental health during this time of COVID-19? And you have such a large background and experience, not only just with individuals, right, on the personal level, but also in a company. So I want to start with personal, and the Rise Up For You Club here, we have a very diverse group. We have executives, we have coaches, and so it's all over. But I'd like to know, like, what is one thing that we can do right now to support our personal mental health? So those of us that are at home right now that are watching this, we're with our family, maybe we're struggling. What can we do during this time?
Okay. Can I give you a few? I have three. I have three really important ones, but I'll make it quick because I know we have a time restriction. For first thing that I really stress to not only my friends, my families, but my colleagues, we need to start off by, number one, being selective of where and how much information that we retain. I've said this on multiple platforms and I continue to say this. We are not only dealing with a global pandemic, we are dealing with a infodemic, right? We are being inundated with information from here and radio and podcasts and news and 24-hour cycles. And I know when I first started, diving into this pandemic, 5 hours would go by and 3 bags of Doritos would go by and I'm still in front of the TV, right? And I'm like, no, I need to get some fresh air because things change so quickly. And I want to stress, it's important to stay on top of it. But we also need to recognize that not all information that we're receiving is accurate, effective, and true, right? We're getting a lot of misinformation. So one of the things that I really want to say is that we need truth and we need information that is accurate. So, in saying that, not everything we read on Facebook is accurate. Not everything we read on Twitter is accurate, right? Knowing where the reputable sources are, the doctors, the professionals, getting information from reputable sources. And in addition to that, being mindful how much information, what times that we're receiving that information. So, for me, going back to my example, I was sitting all day watching news. I had to stop that. So, for me, I watch the 6 o'clock news and that's it. I cannot have my day consumed with watching CNN, right? Or watching Fox News or MSNBC, right? We need to really limit that exposure. That's the first thing. The second thing that I think is really important is converting panic into preparedness. Okay. And now what do I mean by that? When we experience crisis, when we experience trauma, our mind and our body go through fight, flight, or freeze, right? And people start to panic, and we see this really evident when there was all those people hoarding toilet paper, right? And we know that toilet paper has nothing to do with this virus, right? But that's fight, flight, or freeze in its glory right there. And people are going to feel a certain way about this, certain anxieties are going to come up, right? And so we need to be mindful of how our body is responding to that and really self-identifying, what is my fear here? Is my fear that I'm going to get sick? And then once we identify what is our fear, asking ourselves, what is within our capacity to control? Okay, I can't control the direction that this pandemic is going through, but what I can control is how I approach it. Now, once we identify what's within our capacity, now reverse engineer that. I know that in order to keep myself safe, I, number one, need to have a stock first aid kit. Check. I need to make sure that every time I go out, I'm wearing gloves and a mask. Check. I actually have a box of gloves in my car that I use, right? So anytime I go out, it's right there for me, right? I'm using hand sanitizer. I'm not leaving my house unless I absolutely have to. These are things that are within our capacity to control, right? So again, converting panic into preparedness. And the third thing I really want to stress is now more than ever, we need to focus on our self-care. Okay. Now we hear this all the time about, self-care, 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 and it's kind of starting to sound like wah, 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 right? And I'll be the first to admit that. But one of the things that really makes self-care work is a thing that I think a lot of people overlook. Your self-care, in order for it to be true self-care, has to be intentional. And what do I mean by that? What I mean is asking yourself, checking in with yourself and asking yourself, what is my need here? I'm going to use myself as an example. If I do a full 2-day training where I'm talking for 8 hours straight, the last thing that I want at the end of a 2-day training is noise. So for me, going to a loud gym where music is like, do, 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 even though moving my body would be a good thing, I'm not going to feel rested, calmed, and relaxed coming out of that environment. Always ask yourself, what is my need here? Is my need that I need quiet? Is it that I need solace? Is it that I need to move my body, right? Really getting in touch with what your body needs is so important, right? And in that spirit, what I want to say is this. With this whole global pandemic that's happening, a lot of people, a lot of my colleagues, and even a lot of my friends, and I'll admit, I feel guilty of this too sometimes. I feel this need to, I got to do more. I got to finish this. I got to make sure that I I use this time effectively. And one of the things that I really want to give permission for people to really understand is that this isn't a race. It's not a race. There is a reason that the whole world is slowing down right now.
Yep.
Give yourself permission to slow down. Prime example, 2 days ago, I woke up, I wasn't feeling the best. And I said, you know what? Today's the day that I'm going to sit and I'm going to watch 90 Day Fiancé all day. And I gave myself permission to do that. And sometimes we just need to do that. and that's okay.
Absolutely. I
Does
love
that make
it. It makes total sense. And I love what you said, because some of the things, we've been talking about since day one with the Success Club, which is consumption overload, which is the first
Oh,
thing you said, like
too
just
much.
having too much, in your brain. And then really the mental stimulus is over heightened. And so I love that you reiterated that. And just to reiterate, and let me make sure I got this right. So first thing is not to overconsume your mind. Second thing is to turn panic into preparedness.
Yep.
And the third thing is to really dive into self-care, true self-care, not the woo-hoo self-care that we typically
Intentional
do. Intentional
self-care.
self-care.
Yes.
Great, I
Yeah.
love that. Would you say anything different? Because as I mentioned, we have executives here that run companies, people from nonprofits. Are there any action steps that individuals that are in a corporate environment can take to support their team members?
Uh-huh. This is the bulk of my work that I've been
Yes.
doing since this COVID pandemic has kind of erupted. And there are many avenues that we can pursue with this. And I really like to cater and make it specific to organizations. But as a whole, there are a few things that I really want to stress. Number one is providing support. Now, what do I mean by that? The reality of it is that we've experienced a lot of change in the last month. Can we agree on that? Right? The
Yes.
whole world has changed. And one of the things to really be mindful of is that not everybody does well with change. Change can be very jarring for certain people, right? And one of the things that's really important from not just a CEO perspective, but from a managerial or from a management team, a leadership team perspective, and that could be supervisors, managers, key holders, whatever, is being aware of what your staff's barriers and limitations is and not assuming,
Yes.
right? We can't just assume because they're young that they know what a Zoom is, right? They're like, what's a Zoom? I don't know, right? There are many people, and not all employees do well with change. Now we know Business 101, change is inevitable for growth, right? Within any organization. But a lot of people can really struggle with that when we look at things like technology or working in isolation or potentially having a different role or modified duties, especially when they're used to doing the same duties all the time. So checking in with your staff, asking them, what's your comfortability level with using this software? What's your thoughts on working from home versus working in an environment? And how can we make that more conducive for you? Now, from a leadership standpoint, that may require more one-on-one training on how to use a certain software, what have you. But we are in times right now where that has to be a priority. Okay, so that's number one, provide support. Next, providing flexibility. Now, prior to this pandemic, approximately 6% of Americans were working full-time from home. That has grossly changed in light of this pandemic, right? And one of the challenges that comes from working at home is that we have people who are full-time parents, who are now not only full-time parents, but they're full-time teachers, full-time babysitters, and full-time employees all at the same time, right? And that could be really struggling. That could be really tough for some people, right? Especially when we're still expecting to generate for employees to generate the same outcome that
Yes.
they were when they're working in the office 9 to 5 with no distractions, right? So really understanding that there needs to be a flexibility in the outcome that an employee is producing. So things like modifying schedules to make it more conducive for them to parent or to educate their children, right? Providing alternative shift work, modifying hours, modifying duties, extensions potentially on deadlines to accommodate the workload. Those are really going to be crucial because people are wearing so many different hats right now at the same time, right? So we need to factor that in. And finally, my third point that I really want to make is transparency. Now more than ever, communication has to be our strongest tool in our tool belt.
Yes.
With so many changes and so many things moving so quickly, it's so hard to keep up. And one of the things that we know, especially in the corporate world, is that secrets breed mistrust. And when your staff don't trust you, that creates discord within work dynamics. It breeds disgruntled employees and it creates such a toxic workplace. So now more so than ever, transparency has to be key. Now, and there's a lot of ways that we can do that, right? Having regular coffee chats, right? I like to call them, where we're bringing in our staff and saying, okay, this is what's going on. What are your thoughts? What's working? What's not working? And the other thing that I really want to stress is, especially when we're talking about transparency, with things changing so much, engage your frontline staff, right? There's nothing that doesn't sit well with me more than when I see leadership teams having closed door meetings that and making decisions about how frontline staff are going to work without engaging frontline staff, right? Your frontline staff right now are key to the operation of any organization. They see trends that maybe leadership might not see, right? They see outcomes that maybe leadership might not see. So engaging the entire organization, right, is so important because they're just as valuable as any, right? So having that conversation, really letting people know what's going on. And you know what? If your organization is facing struggles, I will tell you, as somebody who's worked in various organizations from government to nonprofit, one of the things that I really respected about any boss that I had was their ability to be honest, right? And if an organization was struggling, say it. Because then collaboratively as a team, we can come together and say, okay, this is how we're going to fix it.
Yep.
Does that make sense?
It makes sense. And you're speaking our language, right? With Rise Up For You and working with companies and having that transparency. And also because when you are transparent, it helps support mental health, as you're saying, because then it prevents us from creating a story in our head.
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
If we don't have information, then as people, we assume, we predict, we make up stuff that may or may not be true that can really be harmful to us.
Secrets breed mistrust. And when your employees don't trust you, I mean, when we look at the statistics around people who leave jobs, people don't leave their job, they leave their boss, right?
Yeah.
And so when there isn't that trust built, right, it can be really detrimental to a workplace. And right now, more than ever, we need that camaraderie. We need that trust. We need to be transparent. Listen, we're all in this together, right? There isn't, this magic wand or a secret that is gonna fix all this. We gotta work together.
Yep. I mean, you're 100%. I love everything that you're saying. Again, you're speaking our language. Jeanette, this has been a really enlightening and great, very much needed conversation. How do we get in touch with you? If somebody has some personal questions, tell us a little bit more about the company, where we can find you.
Okay, fantastic. Yes. So I can completely appreciate that this is going to generate a lot of questions. And if you guys have questions, I am more than happy to answer any questions that you have. I can be reached online at www.ctservice.ca. You can also find me on Instagram and on Facebook at CT Services Inc. DM me and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have. And before I part ways, I just want to say one more thing if I have time.
Of course.
Mental health is important and it requires our attention. And when we are looking especially at a pandemic, right, it is anxiety inducing. Right. And a lot of people are feeling certain ways about what's going on. And I want to give permission to people experiencing that. You're having a normal reaction to an abnormal event. We've never experienced this before, right? There is help. Contact your local distress lines. There are people who can support you, who can help you 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. Contact your local distress line in your communities, in your states, in your provinces, and get help.
Thank you. And you guys, again, this has been a really great conversation. And Jeanette is a part of the Rise Up For You Success Club. So Jeanette, a little bit later, why don't we go ahead and you can post as well yourself all of your information, and then we'll tag and reiterate people, because Jeanette is a very valuable resource to have in the club. And again, just if you have any questions. And now that we are working from home, Jeanette can do this for American organizations. So again, Jeanette, thank you so much. Everybody.
My pleasure.
Yeah, everyone that is joining us here for the Rise Up for You Success Club today, thank you for joining. Please share this message, share the video, because it's very, very important. Again, Jeananne, thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you, guys.
Bye, everyone.